Thanks, guys, for showing up last session. PSU. My name is Marc Grayson. I'm from New York City. I work in a hospital in New York City, and it's located a little bit north of Manhattan, right in the center of the Bronx. We have 6 hospitals, 150 locations, 22,000 employees, and growing all the time. To give you a perspective on how much is coming through our facilities, in 2013, we had 345,000 ER visits, and that was 2013. We're like one of the busiest ERs in the nation. A little bit on the computers. We have 7,000 active sync users, also growing all the time, and that doesn't account for all devices, all mobile devices. Just a little perspective on how much email is going to mobile devices. If you have questions, just please ask them. Don't, feel free to interrupt me. I may give you the finger to hold off a minute because your answer might be in an upcoming slide. So what does this talk about? It's about using MDM, or sometimes it's known as EMM. A lot of the big MDM players are now calling themselves EMM because they're adding additional things on top of the MDM. I'm going to refer to it as MDM because all the stuff that I'm talking about is specific to MDMs. So it's about security, and it's about, I did a talk last year in 2014. That's the link to it if you want to see it. It was about planning, and this kind of conversation is an additional step on that planning, focused on security and choices in choosing what to do with your MDM. And the whys behind those choices. Why should you do this? Why should you do that? And what are some reasonings behind why you're going to make those choices? And again, it's going to be a focus on security. A lot of that security is buried in one kind of component within the MDMs, which is the restrictions. The restrictions, there's a lot of restrictions. So many that they don't quite all fit on this one slide. It took a long time because it's not just this slide.
But it was very
continued.
Yeah.
Continued. And it's not just this slide. There's one more set of even more layered restrictions, and that's when you use supervised devices, or when you supervise the device, you get yet another set of restrictions that you can access. And it's actually in here where there's a lot of security choices. So a lot of my talk is going to be focused on a lot of these, which are in that next step when you supervise the device. So really when you start thinking about you want to put a lot of security into your models, you really start wanting to think about supervision and what that means and how you plan for actually supervising the device. So choices. So in thinking about the choices, you kind of have to make these categories, and I kind of want to define the different styles of devices that you can have out there. So kind of broke it up into kind of these high-level groups, and then from there you can kind of mix and match and make subgroups and kind of take a little bit of each if you want to. So the first kind of upper left is fully corporate managed device, where you're setting as much restrictions, you're locking it down, you're saying this is what I want the people to be able to do, and this is what I don't want them to do. So you're really layering on security, and you're really layering on kind of pigeonholing them into, I'm only going to let you do this with this device. It makes it easy on the management side. You will be getting calls saying, I want to do this, and you're going to have to just prepare for having a policy that says, this is our policy, we can't break it. A little bit kind of less hands-on is more of a light style management, where you'll drop things into the device, but you won't layer on all the restrictions. So you'll let them do some things. You'll put your kind of section in there, which is apps or policies, and you can kind of pull those away or add them as need be. This is kind of a take on that, but that's a BYOD, where the user's bringing in their own device, and you're still dropping in your policies, your apps, but they're allowed to do whatever else they want to, wherever else on the device. And you'll see a difference in the BYOD versus corporate in a minute. And then there's yet one more which kind of comes into play in different organizations, especially in education, which is a shared model. So the user would authenticate, and then they get dropped their corporate stuff. They could then log out, and then that would go away. So if you think about these two types of models, the corporate versus, or the fully managed versus kind of like a lighter style, in this lighter style, there could be lots of variations on that, and they could all live side by side. So it's about creating these groups within the MDM that allow you to kind of set these types of policies, and you can have those different styles all live amongst each other. And you set up where the devices are going to enroll based on the user's needs or based on who the user is. So if we look at these two, they both could have corporate apps pushed, but maybe on the personal side or the BYOD side, you allow personal data and apps, and then on the corporate side, you don't allow that. Here's a big distinction. When you do device wipes, you can set your policies to have a full device wipe versus just wiping the corporate data. And that becomes really important in BYOD because you don't want to wipe somebody's pictures, or you don't want to wipe their manuscript they were writing on their phone. And so thinking about those types of policies as you're building your models becomes very important. So here's the type of restriction that you can do. You can allow activation lock. You cannot allow it. In the past, it was a little bit more important to really think about this, and you'll see how that's changed in a minute. But you have the ability to let somebody else find their own iPhone. How long, so a question would be, how long would it take for your organization to get a phone call and get somebody on looking up where that device is versus the end user knowing how to look up where the device is if it's lost or stolen? If it's over an hour, probably you want to let them have that choice so that they can go out and find their own phone, send the wipe command, send a ping to it. One thing I would kind of suggest is if you are doing remote lookup, in your policy state what you're doing it for, what are the parameters of why you would look up somebody's device, just so that they know that you're not Big Brother watching them all the time, tracking where they go. Maybe you are, just put that in your policy, but just be clear about it. Another kind of thing in the past was when we didn't have control over this, you'd get this screen if somebody's left the organization and they left their Apple ID on the device. So back not too long ago, the only ways to get around this were to, one, have that person unlock it before they left, put in their Apple ID, and then it's an unbricked device. Or two, you had to kind of prove to Apple, they still do, but you prove to Apple that this is a corporate device that you own, show them proof, and they will send an unlock command for you. This website used to be very useful to check whether a device is under activation lock or not. It still works. So where that's changed now is the DEP program. If And the DEP is device enrollment. To get into device enrollment, you have to be supervised. So this is one of those areas where you're now enrolling the device under supervision, and then you get more stuff. BYOD is not going to make too much sense because you really don't want to supervise a BYOD device, because then you have full control, and the end users don't really want to. They want to retain that kind of control on their device. So you won't, so over there, supervision, very nice. Don't have to tether to one laptop or have that central laptop be the one laptop that all the devices connect to. You can do streamlined setups with DEP. So you can kind of get through that startup screen and make the choices on what you want the users to see within that startup screen. So it could be very fast for them to onboard a device. Then other things come with that. You could drop profiles, you can do VPP to them, and you really kind of get full control from the MDM talking to these devices. So that really means like a zero-touch configuration for IT. You can send the device to the user, and you know that that's going to be set up the way you've kind of asked for it to be set up. Some requirements, iOS 7 or greater. And another requirement is you have to have purchased it from Apple or an authorized reseller or a carrier. Without that, you can't do DEP. So how does this work a little bit? So you're at this startup screen, your iPad goes out, connects to Apple, says, I'm here, I'm gonna activate. Apple checks, see if that device is in DEP. If it is, because you have set it to be in DEP, either by your PO that you order from Apple or by serial number because you've entered it into that MDM, Apple will then say, okay, it is a DEP device, go talk to their MDM. And it'll then say, you're talking now to your MDM, and your MDM is going to configure you. There is another setting that you can have, which is mandatory MDM enrollment, which then forces you to say log into your MDM. You don't have to have that step. You can bypass it and it'll still talk to your MDM and get whatever profiles down to it. But if you add this, you're forcing the users to log in with their credentials, and it kind of creates an activation lock for the corporation. So while if you don't want to manage Apple IDs to do your own activation lock, this is kind of the way to build your like corporate activation lock in a sense. And then in the background, what's happening is your MDM, if you have your MDM talking to LDAP, you're getting authentication from within your organization. Another thing that comes with this is lockable enrollment, lockable profiles. So your main profile is non-removable. You can set it to be non-removable as opposed to just an MDM that doesn't have that choice where the end user can remove it. So that would kind of be like that corporate fully managed, and this would kind of be like a BYOD, which the end user leaves and they're able to delete their profile. So again, profiles can be removable. You can make that choice. You can make it a choice to have the main MDM non-removable now. They didn't have that in the past. Or you can set each individual profile that you send to be removable or non-removable. Apps. So do you want to have the end users be able to access the App Store or not? And that you would kind of consider in a fully managed, you wouldn't kind of consider it in BYOD. You can, even though if you decide to lock out the App Store and really kind of containerize and lock it down, you could still push internal apps or you can push VPP apps. So you're still kind of controlling what they do and you're not fully locking out the App Store experience, but you don't give them the choice. Some organizations want that. Siri, you have the ability to So you have the ability to lock Siri out if you don't want it. It may come into play if you're in a HIPAA environment or there's regulations that you can't have data sitting on Apple servers for any period of time. I know for doctors that have want to do medical record, medical translation, you can't use Siri because it's not HIPAA compliant. You can make that choice to say, I want it to go to Siri or I don't want it to go to Siri. You probably wouldn't want to do that on BYOD because people want to use Siri. You can have, these are kind of choices around actual features on the phone, almost physical in a sense, or just like native features to the phone. You can restrict all these things. They all come into play with security. You can not restrict them. The allow voice dialing is more about voice dialing from the lock screen. So really think about those restrictions. There's a lot of like lock screen restrictions. Do you want notifications to be on your lock screen or not? Depending on what your apps are and what type of data that is being transmitted through the notifications, you may want to shut off things that show up on the lock screen. Here's another example of restriction. You can do geofencing. So if a device leaves that geofencing area, it wipes the corporate data or wipes the corporate policies that are set for when the device is in that geofence. This is a really hard thing to kind of think about because there's a lot of variables around geofencing. If a person's on break, if a person's going to lunch, does that count? If they cross that geofence, is it okay that their policies are wiped? They don't have access to email, they don't have access to a certain app. Let's say the person's on vacation the day that they're off-site, or they are off-site to do some work. Do those geofences then kind of cross your model and then not allow the user to do what they need to do? Jailbroken detection. MDMs have the ability to look for jailbroken devices and then act on jailbroken devices. So the minute it detects there's a jailbroken device, it can remove corporate data. You might want to do that for BYOD, you're pulling aside the corporate stuff, and then definitely for your fully corporate managed devices. VPN, you always want VPN on. That's a feature. You can basically have always on if you have the infrastructure to support it, and that would just, all the data from the phone is tunneled through your enterprise. Again, probably not through BYOD because people are going to be doing So within that same kind of realm, you can choose to set up certain apps to have VPN on all the time. So that's kind of what you might want to think about for BYOD versus corporate. Yeah.
All right. So forgive me if this is a stupid question. I don't deal with MDM a lot, but the selective wipe that you're talking about, are you talking about active sync wipes versus like an MDM wipe, or is there a mechanism for selective wipe in MDM?
Yeah, there is some MDMs call it enterprise wipe, some MDMs call it selective wipe, and I'm talking about that.
Okay.
I'm not talking about active sync wipe because I believe active sync wipe only just yeah. Although in the past there used to be the setting to device wipe.
Yeah, I don't know if you still can or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't kept up with active sync. Yeah.
Active sync for both.
Yeah, and so when I'm talking about wipes, I'm always talking about wipes coming from the MDM, and you have the ability to kind of make those choices, but you have to set it up beforehand within each of those models that you build out. And as admins, you can set who can wipe devices, so you can kind of set up policies that say, only IT security can wipe devices, and then they have to go through for these types of devices, it's restricted so that they cannot do a full device wipe versus these devices that you can do a full device wipe. So it's really important to set those up like as you're building your MDM. safety and backing up. Do you want to allow iCloud backups or not? You have the ability to enforce encrypted backups. That's actually encrypted backups when you're connecting to the device and backing up through iTunes. But corporate devices, maybe you don't want that residing on Apple servers. It is encrypted, but it's still on their servers. And then for BYOD, you probably don't want to restrict it. People want to back up their stuff. So MDM can go beyond just the phones. Can make it to your Apple Watch. One policy is require wrist detection. So as I take my device off, as I take my Apple Watch off, it locks down just like there's a lockdown setting on the phone, and people can't read my email as soon as I take it off my wrist. WatchOS 2, they're coming out with activation lock for the watch. So just like I have activation lock on my phone, I'll eventually have it on here. If you add the wrist detection, which most people do already, you're kind of building that kind of. At least you have protection because it gets locked down. This takes it a step further, which requires that you, as you wipe the device, to actually get going again, you're gonna have to activation lock. So a funny thing happened when I got my Apple Watch. First thing, I open it up, shiny new watch, and I want to get my email onto my nice watch. But my phone said I have to have a complex passcode on my phone to get email, because that's what my MDM was saying. What happens with the watch? I can't do complex passcodes on my watch. So it, in a sense, is kind of doing some MDM to my device by way of my phone. There was a workaround, which is you remove email, you remove the setting for email, you set a passcode, you then push email, and that kind of worked around, and you were able to get email and still have the digit passcode without having to use your phone's passcode. So, just wrapping up, think about security when you're building your MDM models. What are those choices that you kind of really feel like you need to have to secure your devices, and what are the people going to be doing with those devices will kind of help you choose those choices within what you restrict, what you don't restrict. That's kind of it. So questions, answers, feedback, there's the link. Thank you. We have time. Or we're ending early because last session.
Are you going to get into a battle royale?
Can I ask you questions about work?
No.
No?
Unless it's MDM work.
So you use Meraki for the actually being able to be
So Meraki used to have, so Meraki was a good choice in using a free MDM to like play with. They don't have that, I don't think they have that anymore.
It's more that
You have to buy support.
other people that have had it in,
Right.
and then you could pay for ongoing support. So
Right. So if you don't have an MDM and you want to play with MDM, a lot of the big MDM players allow you to set up for a free trial for 30 days or so. So you really can get in there, see all the settings, play with restrictions. There's also a $19 MDM, which is called Profile Manager. It's not the best MDM, it's very limited, doesn't have all the features, but does have all those restrictions. So those restrictions are really based on Apple's protocols, so that's all there. It's the extra stuff that the other MDM vendors build in that's very strict. Profile Manager is very stripped down for. Yeah.
Have you seen anyone do, I don't think there's any official support for this, but some kind of automation with enrollment with depth? So in our case, we could have hundreds of potential buyers, some of which should be in depth, some of which should not. And so there's no sane way where currently, at least for us, that the amount of labor to enroll things in depth, I don't know, unless I hire an intern just to go and log in every day and add in order numbers.
Yeah.
It's not sort of viable.
I mean, you have to set that list of devices that go into depth. So if you
There's no API to set the, like,
No.
you have to two-factor into a
Yep.
web app, which is not really automation.
Yeah. You can do it. You can do it based on order. So if you say I'm ordering this set of devices, you can say this whole order gets DP.
It's worth it if, say, the business school orders 300 laptops at once, but every given day there might be
One or two, yeah.
one or two.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Do you have an Apple rep you work with?
Sure.
If you email them, just tell them, this corporate, this account, add this to it. They'll take that email. You could automate
They'll do it
the
for them.
process. Minutes coming in, send an email. We do that all the time. Put it before us.
There's volume.
So
they're doing the work for you.
Sent them like 4,000 devices, and they dealt with it. So they didn't have to sit there and type them all in. They just sent them an email with zero.
We all do that, maybe though.
I think that is automation. You're not having to do it.
You have to send the email.
Well, you can script that.
Yeah.
Email's not an API.
You can only script it if you know, based on the order, which one of those should go in depth.
But then if you're planning your orders, you can just say this whole order is going to be in depth, and then I'll do a separate order for non-depth devices.
Except ordering is totally decentralized, and I have no idea where people are ordering.
Right.
Nor actually do I want to.
Right.
But I mean, that may just be a particular case for us.
No, it comes up a lot when you're doing these onesie twosie orders, and it's just coming, ad hoc all the time.
Can you explain app wrapping?
Yes. After his question first. Yeah.
So our MDM requires that users have two-factor authentication before they enroll. So they have to put in their password and like a 8-character password or whatever. Can that work with the DEP?
What portion is it? Everything on the network? So like, is Wi-Fi?
Everything.
So have you ever tested on the startup screen how you deal with Wi-Fi? I don't, my thinking would be if you don't have a guest network and your internal network requires that, then it just you won't even get through the startup screen to get online.
Well, I mean, he's talking the actual
The DAP piece.
decision point of I'm enrolling in the MDM itself, right? You need to present that token?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
No.
no field in
No.
Apple spec for a token. Like,
So
hey,
you'd have to
if
set
there's
up
another
two-factor.
challenge that's going to happen in this interaction.
No.
You can put it in here. There's no catch-all for that. I'm not sure that they can because of the different ways that people want to use
Two factors. Yeah.
solution. I'm not sure that they can handle those cases.
So Alistair asked about app wrapping. Not all MDMs allow you to do it. The ones that do.
So what is app
So
wrapping, though?
yeah, so the ones that do allow you to app wrap is the concept is you take an app that you own, an app that you internally built or you've gotten from B2B where you kind of have the licensing to kind of do whatever you want with that app. You throw it into the MDM and you can do this thing called app wrapping, which layers on extra securities that the MDM provides, maybe the app doesn't provide. So if you want to AD authenticate in the app itself, you can force a kind of overlay screen before you get into that app that's actually coming from the MDM because you've wrapped that app, and the MDM gives you the APIs to kind of layer in those securities. That's the kind of the best method. That's the best example of what you can do with app wrapping. You can't do that officially with a with an app that you get from the App Store, some devices, some MDM providers have it there that you can do that, but it breaks the terms and conditions of Apple's terms and conditions around using apps. So if you go and do that, don't expect support from the developer or Apple, because you are breaking the terms and conditions. So yeah, there's some other components of app wrapping that you can get, and they are heavily around security, but it all comes from whatever the MDM has available as additional APIs that you can kind of bundle into your private app.
Just like every other system, I'll keep asking questions.
Go for it.
So we decided not to go with Intune.
Yes.
Microsoft solution. Our security evaluated specifically said there was a lack of granularity in applying restrictions. What can you explain?
So the way that MDMs work in terms of creating the different styles of groupings, or that first screen where I defined what style of device you have, a lot of the MDMs do things differently in terms of applying restrictions to those types of devices and building out those categories. So for example, AirWatch, you make the groups based on a hierarchy. So you can set policies at a high level, and then as you get further down the tree, you can set additional policies on top of it. But you can't kind of mix and match in their model because of this hierarchy tree. You can move things further down the nest, but you can't move things up the nest. So you kind of get limited by how you build and the policies that you set out to the devices. Other MDMs allow you to do that mix and matching because they just built their database differently. So you can take a restriction from this group and say, you know what, you almost think of it as tags. So you can say, this is a policy that I want for this group. Let me just drop it into this group. And now I've set the tag for it, so it gets this policy. And you can do that mix and matching, and it becomes a lot easier to kind of just build those categories on the fly and constantly change them. Intune, they were just, when we looked at them, they were just very early on. So they didn't have a lot of things that all the other MDMs had, especially in terms of the restrictions and the extra stuff that all the rest of the MDMs do. They were really, like all the MDM providers that are trying to just get on board now, they're far behind, and so they don't have a lot of the flexibility of building out and, you know, making the flexible choices that some of the kind of the big players have. And so when we looked at Intune, they just didn't have much there. And so it was just based on the restrictions. There wasn't much else. And it was kind of hard to be flexible about how you built out devices. And Intune specifically works very closely with SCCM. So if you're a SCCM shop, maybe it makes sense. But there was a lot of like SCCM kind of style of management that was built into Intune that isn't so conducive to kind of just building out lots of different models. Yeah.
Which MDM do you use?
So we use AirWatch currently, and we're about to move away from it. And so maybe in my next talk I'll be presenting on that.
Who are you going with?
We are going with Mass 360.
You're a hospital. I also work for a hospital. So what's your biggest hiccup? How do you get around all that stuff? I know we have nightmares. We know how doctors are. They want what they want. Like you say about policies that have to be in place. My hospital, the more you make, the more leverage you have to get around those policies. So how do you deal with that?
Everybody abides by the rules, and nobody puts PHI on mobile devices.
Nobody uses Siri. So that the honest truth is, it's hard. It's a difficult problem to solve because you want to give them the tools for them to do their work and to be more efficient, and they don't have enough time. So you want to have them use the tools so that they can buy their time back. But it comes at, if you lay these restrictions on, you got to kind of weigh whether this becomes is it still a smartphone, or is it just a dumb phone with terminal apps that you're just saying you can get to this, but you can't get to that. So it's a work in progress. We constantly work in.
Information on security breaches through those devices in your field, and then take that information to somebody when they say, no, you can't. I can't have these security on here. I can't do this. We'll show them a worst case scenario.
We have an entire security office, and they're a nightmare.
No.
They are like complete opposite of like everything's a nightmare. And you know, HIPAA violations, there's an hospitals will fine $1 million per incident.
Yeah.
So they start there.
Yep.
Because doctors don't care. So it doesn't matter what you show them. They sign risk assessments like a Siri was born. That was completely unacceptable.
Yep.
So one person complained, okay, this
I don't like it.
it's not the sign this risk assessment, you can have it.
Yeah, you make those. I mean, it's a little bit outside of the planning and the architecture, and it really comes down to IT security, and it's kind of about the choices that they want to set and the lines they want to draw, and who gets the ability to cross those lines and how.
Yeah, we actually put iMessage and texting there. Send it to PHI, so we ended up like text.
Yeah. Yep. Wait.
It's like every day we can, oh, that's going to be an extra $1 per user.
Yeah, so we're using a product called Curator, which is a secure text. It's not, Tiger Text is a secure texting app. This is secure texting, but there's also workflows built into it. They're passing patients to one another, and they're passing PHI, but it's secured and totally HIPAA compliant.
We also do with like just email. How's that? That
Yeah.
the security team believes that active sync can't get on a device because you could possibly miss those credentials when it's exchanged.
Right.
It's just happening.
So yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, and we try to do as much as we can, but there are some like overarching policies that may squash whatever you're trying to do. So for devices that we issue, that's where we feel like we have the most control, and it's those devices where we can make all those policies and lay them down and say, this is the way it's going to be, because it's not the end user's device. So I think it really comes down to planning of, if you're going to do BYOD and those doctors are going to have BYOD devices, limit what they can get to, and just say, you know, it's a BYOD device, you're limited because of that. If you want everything, either come under full management, or and know that this is the controls that we have, or actually come get a device from us. Have 2 devices.
We tried the whole, we bought iPads for all the residents, really locked them down, and they went to really high up person. This is ridiculous. They weren't using them, they were wasting money, I locked them down.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
We just moved them all to the guest network.
we got lucky by just being contacted by them that they were going to consider it, so that we could show them 11-inch MacBook Airs. Because which ones they wanted. Because we had a lot of stuff through Citrix, so like the Citrix experience on an iOS device is okay. They're adding mice support. That's totally the right way to respond to their challenges. It's like the trackpad coming in iOS 9. Oh yeah. So what are you looking forward to in what's coming down the pike? Actually working on my iOS 9 device is pretty darn awesome. Two-finger trackpad.
In doing this talk, I haven't thought about iOS 9 at all. There are things that I'm looking forward to, but not based on security and not based on MDM per se.
I'm looking forward to nightly updates.
And nightly updates, and over there, update pushing without you having to accept the device, accept the update is pretty cool. Works in models where there's shared devices and you don't have the owner actually making the choice to update. Just send that update out if the device is on, if it's charged.
Is anyone using single app mode? Yeah, we could talk a whole lot about that.
So in
People
turn,
are crazy enough to do it.
so thank you. In terms of security, there is this, which I didn't touch at all on. There is a way to even lock down the device more, which is this single app mode. So if you have these use cases of you have this one app, the person that's taking out that device is doing this one workflow within that one app, you lock it down in this single app mode, and all they can do is just work within that one app. They can't use the home button, they can't break out of it. You reset the device, it launches, it restarts, and it boots right back into that app. So you're really laying on another layer of security that's, I can only use this app. I can't change settings, I can't do anything else. Because even when you lay all the restrictions on, you can still do things like shut off Wi-Fi. You could turn the device off. So there are those things that happen even with all the restrictions. But the single app mode is kind of like this complete security model around the device where you can't even turn it off. If you turn it off, it doesn't let you turn it off. You can do the reboot, but it reboots and you're back right into that app. The only way to actually shut it off is just letting the battery die. So, but there are problems with it as well. The problems come around, you have to always have Wi-Fi on because it's always communicating with MDM and saying, should I still be in this lock mode? And we've seen sometimes where if you lose Wi-Fi, it kind of can sometimes break out of that single app mode, and then people can start messing with the devices. And that's when we see the devices kind of, get called in saying, I don't know what's happening with the device because somebody's had it for a while off Wi-Fi, and then they started messing with it, and then they kind of broke the connection with MDM. Anything else, Alistair? Any other questions? So thanks guys at the PSU. Great to be here, and yet again, another great conference. Thanks.